Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner. My mind is blown. I don't even have a line for it. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on April 22nd, 2025. Kris. Another mind-blowing episode, and we were able to talk about one of my favorite topics, page scripting. We also talked a lot about Business Central with the AI agents, and we also talked a lot about MCP service. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Vincent Nicolas.
All right.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. That's better. I can hear you and see you guys now.
Oh, very
Excellent.
good.
That's cool.
Excellent.
Sorry about that must have been, I don't know what's worth. Just,
No, it's good. Good afternoon. How are you doing? Hope you recovered from the wonderful trip to Vegas.
Yeah, actually, I'm just back. I'm still a little bit jet lagged. I was. We took a vacation and went to Costa Rica after Vegas.
Oh, very cool.
Nice.
Yeah, we just landed like on Sunday. So yeah, still recovering a little bit from the jet lag, but.
Oh, the time difference. I have a 3-hour time difference, and I only went to Vegas for the conference and back. And it took me, I think, a few days to recover just from the 3-hour time difference and being there for a few days. So you having the opportunity to get used to the time difference, then have to go back must be a little more challenging.
Yeah.
3 hours is nothing, man. 3 hours.
Yours is a good day.
That's what I was. That was my point. Is 3 hours isn't a lot. Someone like yourself, who I think you had 8 hours, I believe, for Vegas, or 9 hours, excuse me.
I think that's
And
about
then,
right.
yeah, it's almost a full day. It makes for a challenge to go through it too. So, how was your experience at the conference? I thought that was one of the best conferences that I had attended.
Yeah, it was great to interact with partners and the community as usual. We were discussing internally how much we come with a specific intentions. We want to drive a message and drive we have an agenda. We want the channel to basically ramp up on this whole AI thing. It was mostly what one of the big thing in the conference. And we really want people to start doing things with that fantastic new technology. So that's the message we're trying to deliver at that conference, and I hope we succeeded. I mean, you tell me. I hear a lot of so my personal impression is that the channel is very there's a whole spectrum. People, it goes from people realize that there's something there which probably is going to be interesting for their and valuable for their businesses, but they haven't started yet. Till people who are deep into it and already doing prompt engineering and have their own AI feature, and then there's everything in between. But I think it's partly also because this thing is going so fast that people, even we have a hard time to keep up with it. So I imagine that it's hard for everybody to kind of figure out what should I do? What's the
Well, there are some challenges with it. I think the big point that you made is it's going too fast, and it's faster than I think users can adopt. And the conversations I typically have is, if you look at the advances in civilization, it took us 50,000 years to make an axe. And then as time progressed, the amount of time before new technologies released now it's almost like Moore's laws with the chips. You can only go so fast, and the window in Windows getting smaller and smaller, where it almost feels like every day there's a new feature. And I don't know if our brains can keep up with it, but it's also, from the customer's point of view, how can they change their business to adopt these technologies so quickly as well? So it's not always sometimes the partner point of view. It's the partner point of view to be able to accept the technology, to be able to work with customers to implement it. But it's also customers to be able to have, how can I, in some instances, have a radical shift in my business to be able to take advantage of these new features and functionality. And at the rate where it's coming out, it's almost like trying to change the wheels on the bus as the bus is driving down the highway in some cases.
Yeah.
And I think
that's a big challenge, Brad, because like I know it's a partner focused event with ISVs, right? And the challenge is two parts. It's the way I see it. One, considering there's different sizes of partners too. So there's small partners, large partners, medium partners. Is how do you utilize the Copilot within the organization first, and then you're expected to implement it for a client. So not only you're trying to figure out how would you use this day to day within your organization, and then also at the same time convince your customers, your clients, of how do you use Copilot when in fact you're also still trying to figure out yourself. So, and then can you build a solution for a small partner? That's a little tough. You're like building a solution around Copilot. At the same time, you're a small shop, and then at the same time trying to convince your client to use Copilot. That's a big challenge.
Yes, I do have one big takeaway from the conference, and I think it's not narrowed on the AI, and something that I realized from conversations with partners in some of the sessions. But before we jump into that, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, you mean like in general? Or
introduce yourself. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so yeah, my name is Vincent Nicolas. I am the chief architect for Business Central. I've been working with Business Central for I think more than 10 years now. So we have a relatively small team working for me, and what we look into is mostly innovation, new technology. So we do a lot of things with AI at the moment because that's a new thing, and so we're trying to do the groundbreaking stuff. Like what's the next big thing. So some of the things we're working with, I will never make it to the product, but some of them you might see in 2, 3, 4 releases from now. So we try to be a little bit ahead of the game, and at the same time, when we have, if there's something, like if there's a fire burning, like we have these, major performance issue or something, then it's all hands on deck. So we, some of our folks are some of the best folk we have in organization. So they go in and try to fix, whatever needs to be fixed. So that's kind of the charter of what I do with my team.
You're the innovative firefighters. So you're working on keeping things moving forward. But when there's a fire, you're the special reaction team that jumps into working with it. That's a big responsibility, and I'm interested to hear if some of the things we just talked about with innovation and how fast it's coming out, how to plan 3 or 4 releases ahead, because the way technology is moving, we don't know what tomorrow will bring in a sense. But to go back to the one big thing, and I had mentioned it just in a previous episode, I think that came out of it is we have a lot of features and functionality. I think this is across the board, and it stemmed from conversations during some of the sessions and also some of the networking events. We have a lot of features and functionality within the application, and it's great to say that we have these features and functionality, and a lot of us that work with it from the partner point of view. And this is the responsibility of the community, the partners, and it's not a fault with Business Central, because Business Central to me it's been my life, and I'm a super fan of it. And I realized that in conversation is we have all these features and functionalities, and I think what's being missed in some cases is how to apply it in the real world. So we have features and functionality that are added, but what is a good user story for how to use the features and functionality, and more importantly, when to use it? Because in some cases, you could set something up one way or set it up another way, or use a different part of the application to help make for a better implementation. So I think that was a big takeaway that I had from some of the sessions, because the sessions themselves did have good user stories for when to use the features and functionality. And that's what I realized, like, it was like an aha for me of it's not just the lateral, we can do this now. We have an AI agent. We have, project orders. We have this. It's okay. Well, now you have an AI agent. This would be a good case when to use the AI agent. This would be a good case when to use a production order. This would be a good case to use an assembly order as such. So I think
that's something. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because that kind of we so from the Microsoft side, we'll ship some AI-based features. We'll keep doing that, but I think personally, I think very quickly will be somewhat. I don't want to say limited, because there's tons of things we can do, but the real value, back to your point, Christophe, before, the real value will come from the partner channel, because that's we will never implement an AI feature which is industry specific. But that's, I think, where the real value is. If you're working, I don't know, in construction business, I don't know, in wineries or whatever, I'm sure there are tons of scenarios there that can leverage AI, and that will need to come from you guys. That will need to come from the community and the channel. So it's our hope is that when at conference like this one, when you see what others are doing, get inspired. Even if it's not might not be your own domain or your own industry, but you get inspired. Say, okay, they are doing that. Maybe I can do. Maybe that could somehow translate to my domain, to my customers. What they are doing and the solutions I'm working on. Somehow. So that's I think that's one of the great things with these conferences, that too, if that type of osmosis can happen, then I think that's great, and that's how we will be successful all together.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was my takeaway from that. It's right along with what you were saying is it is us to be able to have that good user story, like you said, because you have the features, you have the functionality, and it's up to the community of almost how to apply it, or to come up with the ways to apply it for specific functions, because we all know, even with what we do downstream from what you with the product, it's a challenge. You can't have something that solves everybody without a little change in maybe a configuration. Even some people use variants, some people don't, right? But the functionality's in there, and how you use it is all part of the implementation, which is good. You had mentioned you work with the implementation. We can talk about some firefights afterwards, but with technology moving so fast and technology changing, how do you plan 3 or 4 releases out? Do you have more detail for the next release, and then 3 or 4 releases out, you have sort of a broad stroke desire?
Yeah, so we have so we always have, so we, as you know, we have a 6-month cadence. So we plan at a minimum 6 months ahead. But still, I would say we still have a quite agile process. So we need to make some kind of plan, because we need to have some we need to kind of tell a little bit ahead of time what's going to be in the next release, right? But that said, we still have a little bit of wiggle room to kind of modify the plan, in the 6 months period, because we have a pretty successful, I would say, agile process. So that's for what already is planned, but we never plan. We don't do detailed planning more than 6 months ahead, because we realize this is the big learning, I think, in our industry, like these waterfall models, they just don't work, right? So whatever you plan beyond 6 months probably is not going to happen, or it's going to look totally different. But the world is changing now. The world is changing so fast that there's really literally no point in doing that. No, I mean, so that's overall from a BC engineering team standpoint. In particular, in my team, we do a lot of experimentation, prototyping, and some, as I was mentioning before, some of it don't make it to the product, or maybe not yet. We have some things in a drawer that we have had for a while. We have tons of ideas and things we could do, but we choose not to do because we prioritize other things. And one of the things I'm sometimes have some interesting conversation with my peers is okay, I have this thing which I really wanted to get in the product, and depending on what other parties there is, we can have interesting discussions about it, right? But that's in the end, it's all a matter of prioritizing against each other, and you can say there are always things that would come on top, things like security. They're like priority zero. If any security things we need to any security work always take precedence. Then there's things like compliance that we need also to do. So these are the things that are not negotiable. So they're always on the top of our backlog. And then after that, everything is question of what we want to prioritize. And what we try to do is so at the leadership team level, we try to set some strategic goals for the product. And then we try to align the backlog and how we execute on this strategy, afterwards so that's more of the detailed planning of it, right?
You must have the best job to be able to, create some ideas and like, oh, maybe we should do this next, or we have a little bit of time. Let's try to scoot this in there and be creative as possible.
It's a really great job in that sense that you get to. But I mean, okay, I make it sound maybe a little more romantic than it is, because it's not like we just spend our time prototyping and then that having fun and whatever mix of the product. So we do have I can't go and spend all my resources on some things which are not relevant for the product. So these things need to be to some extent relevant to the product. So right now we are doing a lot of things around AI, because that's our number one strategic goal at the moment. I can share a little bit of what we're working on. I mean, some of it is confidential, but I can share the part which is not. So we're doing some more experiment with the page scripting thing.
You can't even
So
that right
excited.
there. You just lost me at that, because I am I don't want to say the biggest, but one of the biggest fans of page scripting. So let's talk about some of the things you have, and I will tell you what I love about page scripting. I saw the roadmap, and I wish that what was listed on the roadmap, like you could fast forward everything, because I did 2 regional sessions on it. And I was shocked that I don't even want to interrupt you on this, but I had to, because you hit like a trigger for me. I was shocked that no one in the room knew of the page scripting. But after the session, both of those sessions ran over, and everyone had so many visions of how they could apply page scripting from the conversation. And then also at Directions, we did a lengthy page scripting session that encompassed a little bit more than the page scripting used for user accepting testings, but some other things that you could do with it. So keep going with your list, and we can definitely jump back to that.
That's a long-term favorite, man.
It's like what I usually say that when we discuss priorities, there's hardly any feature. People were literally. So I showed that very early at, I think, Tech Days. Even before it was shipped, where it was the prototype, and at that time I said, well, this is something that might or might not make it to product. Man, the feedback I got was like totally overwhelming. And people literally at conferences like Direction, they would stop me in a hallway and asking me, when are you going to ship the page scripting? So I never experienced that with any other thing we put in the product. So that's clearly something that people see a lot of potential into. So but we not. So it's the first thing we need to do is to remove this preview tag. So we want to because it still has a preview tag, so we need to remove that. But that's just a matter of it's not because it's not production quality, but there's a few things around compliant things around accessibility and documentation, I think like that, get under control.
Is that what the preview tag is? Because I have had the question on what preview means for a feature in the product, because there have been other features that had the preview tag.
Yes.
And I was asked in a session, what does the preview tag mean? So maybe before we continue with that, not to interrupt you again, which, like I said, you have me super excited now, so I'll probably interrupt you on the page scripting, but can you explain the significance of the preview tag and what it means for the feature within the
That's a
product?
very good question. So the preview tag essentially means several things. So it means, first of all, there's limited to no support, meaning like you can use the feature. It's mostly when we put a feature out there with a preview tag, means that we want to gather feedback on that feature before we actually put it in production. But there's no guarantee that we'll ever ship the feature. We can, if the feedback is, very negative, or we realize there's too much work, or it's just not good enough, we can always pull it back. I don't recall any example where we ever done it, but this is a possibility. We could potentially pull the whole thing back and say, okay, we're not going to do it anyway. Right? So that's one of the meaning of the preview of the preview tag, and so limited support to no support. Whereas there might be some things which are not quite finished and polished in the, although we tend to have a pretty high bar anyway, even though we put a preview tag on. But there's such a thing that we call it internally, we call it the Microsoft tags. We can, all the features we release, they need to be accessible. You need to go through security review that we have to do anyway, because obviously it has to be secure even though it's preview. It needs to be fully documented. And then there's things like versions. I'll give you an example. With the page scripting, we're discussing whether if we when we make it production ready, right, and remove the preview tag, we have this YAML format behind it, and we've been discussing, so far we have been, free to make changes to it. Like we can change, tomorrow we can decide to change whatever format. We save the scripts in YAML, and then if we break your scripts, we don't care because it's preview. That's what it is. You might have tons of scripts, all of a sudden they won't work because we changed the format. That's just the way it is when it's preview, right? Whereas when we put it in production, then we can't do that anymore. Meaning we'll have to, at minimum, either document the format, which is part of the feature, or we need to be backward compatible with the previous versions of the format, right? Or have some kind of migration path, one way or the other. You might have to reload the script and save it again, or things like that, to update it to the next format. So all these things need to be in place where things are not in preview anymore.
Yeah, I think where page scripting is one of the favorites across the board. It's certainly for me. It's a solution that solved a problem that spans across all different areas of business, and it spans across a partner and as well as a client end as well. So those kind of things, although it doesn't seem like it's not like AI driven, Copilot driven yet, but it's such a great feature that anybody can pick it up and use it for, to solve a problem, or use it to simplify a process, or some testing, things like that. And again, it's usable across all business aspect. That's probably one of my favorites for sure.
Oh, you can't stop with me. It was 2023. I mentioned it at Directions. Duilio and I did a session together on PageScript, and we did mention when you introduced it, I think it was June 2023 at BC Tech Days. And ever since I saw that, I've been on board with it. And just the uses of it are creative, from documentation to training materials outside of the user acceptance testing. And I've also talked with some that they got creative on ways to enter data, because you can change the YAML file so that they automated, doing some tasks.
This is another reason why we have kept it in preview for so long, because we knew from the very beginning that there was a wide range of possible usage of it, and it's both a blessing and a curse, because if you start saying this is something you can use for documentation or troubleshooting, then you also need to support the scenarios and test it for that, right? So that all of a sudden the range of potential utilization expands, which needs more testing for us, more support. Whereas if we say, okay, this is the scope of this is end user testing, so it's a much more limited scope, and it allows us to say, okay, if you use it for anything else, that's at your own risk, right? We don't prevent anybody to use it for other things, which I can hear you've been, diligently doing, which is fine, But we might, if we come up with us, hey, I have this scenario when I do, documentation or record troubleshooting or whatever, we might say this is not something we support at this stage, right? So this is another reason why we have the preview tag. But so we just, I can share a little bit of news with you. So we've been very focused on the end user testing partner. That's basically how we basically presented that feature. But I think we're shifting the focus a little bit now to be more partner oriented, because we realize, partners are using it also a lot. So we have, this is, we are taking a broader perspective on the page scripting than just the end user.
I'm so happy to hear that. And again, as I agree with what you're saying, it's the uses people do get creative, but the ability to test. And is there anything that you can share from the roadmap that will be out soon, or is it all confidential? I can put my top 10 wish list if you want.
I'd rather not.
Okay.
I'd rather not.
Well, if you can sneak in you don't have to say anything, but if you can sneak in the editing of it.
I can tell you something which I can tell you what we're experimenting with. And again, it's the, disclaimer, it might not make it to the product at all. But some of the ideas we have was, is to somehow, imagine when you do your step, you could somehow involve an LLM at some stage. And I'm not going to say anymore.
Brad, you and I have been talking about that. I think we had spoken to others as well about like our wish list, and I think it was around that. So yes, that would be fun.
Mine to start is you can edit the YAML file and load it. Would be to be able to edit the script while it's there, to delete a step, to add a step, to reorganize a step, because sometimes I'll go through a scripting and I want to put a conditional or a validation, and in the conditional I'll forget to put the end in.
Yeah.
So I have to either edit the YAML file or I have to record over again, and also merge two scripts. I understand that the concept of the scripts is to have small use cases for users, but the ability to maybe take two of them together. I know we can use replay, which I think was a great addition as well, to be able to do a wide range of testing. And now with AL Go, you can also use page script tests in there. It's just I have to slow down my excitement. I'm sorry. I feel like a kid now. I'll lose focus here.
All of these things are on the backlog. So there, all of these features are obvious, so to speak. So everybody wants them. So they will. I'm pretty confident they will make it to the product at some stage. I can't tell you exactly when and how we will prioritize. We're still, even for the next upcoming 6 months, I think we're still discussing what's going to be. But there's going to be some things. It might be, depending on how we allocate resources and all that. It might be a little bit disappointing in that sense that it might be the only thing we do is remove the preview tag. So that's like the most boring version of it. But that means that means that the next release we can, all the resources we'll be using on page will be for new features, right? But maybe we'll be able to also add some new stuff for. We have Peter Boring, which is the PM responsible for page scripting, and he's managing that backlog, and he's doing a great job at it. So
no, I understand it's not easy, and then also there's a lot that goes into the product.
We'll keep, there's so much demand and so much usage of it, so we'll keep working on it. I'm sure.
Great. I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you. So I interrupted you when you were talking about some of the things that you were working on. You jumped on the page scripting, but I almost feel it was, it's something that just took me for a side rail here because of my passion for that. I could talk about that every day in every conference with everyone. So what are some of the other things that you have in the back burner, the pipeline, or some of the cool things? Oh, and AI within page scripting would be cool too, because for it to be able to dynamically change.
Yeah.
Real time response.
So just, talking about it, just a hint, right? So some of the things you can try some stuff with page scripting and AI today. Let me tell you how. I've done some experiment with it, and it's actually there's some potential there. So here's the thing. LLMs are really good at generating structured output. All right. If you especially if you use like few shot prompting and this kind of techniques where I'm telling them, this is the kind of output they want. So you can do things like, take a YAML recording, put it into the prompt and ask the LLM to, generate more tests doing other things, or, and output that particular format and give examples of recordings you have. Right? And actually that works pretty well. So you can do cool stuff.
I'm trying that after this conversation. I assure you, I am trying that, because I've used LLMs going the other way to create user documentation, not to create tests. I can honestly say I didn't try that.
But go expand with it, because so first of all, LLMs are really good at generating structured output, and especially if it's things like they have seen a lot of. Like, there's a lot of YAML on the internet. There's a lot of JSON, And JSON is even better because, these days, I'm sure but, these GPT models, they even train specifically to generate JSON, to be good at generating JSON. So they're really good at, but they're doing pretty good job with YAML, which is not too far from JSON anyway. So try to play around with that. That's fun. And I'm sure
I will try that. And if I have some issues, I'll use the new feature for converting JSON to YAML and vice versa. So I will do some tests with, as you had mentioned, if there's not a lot of YAML with the structure, maybe trying a script with YAML, converting it to JSON, telling it to make some changes, then converting it back to YAML to C.
When you do this LLM stuff, what do you use?
What do you mean? What do I use?
You use a ChatGPT, Copilot.
It depends what I'm working on. I use Copilot for coding and such. I'll use GitHub Copilot. I'll have files open in the editor, and then I'll choose the different models. I found Claude Sonnet with AL seems to work better. And then the other models work depending on what I'm going to work with. But I think with the YAML, I'll try to see what Claude Sonnet does with creating the tests.
You can try Azure AI Foundry if you haven't tried it.
Azure AI Foundry, I haven't worked with it that much. There's only so much I can work with. I've been working with some of the LM for local language models, primarily, other than GitHub Copilot.
Marcel wrote a blog about how he used Azure AI Foundry.
Brad. It's just a UI, it's a front end too. But the thing is good about it is that it has, you can tweak some of the parameters in the UI, which is, that's one thing, but also it has actually a drop-down box where you can ask, specifically generate results in JSON, and that will leverage the OpenAI API, because it's supported at the API level actually. So what it does is actually, when it sends the request, there's a flag you can set in there in the request you send that says to the LLM generate the response as a structured JSON, and you will get a JSON back. You have to tell. Funny enough, in the prompt, you have to say it has to be in JSON, even though you have the whatever. Otherwise, you get an error. I don't know that's clear, but that's just when you use it directly from the API, you don't have to do that. But in Azure AI Foundry, somehow you have to, and then so it works really well with the so-called few shot examples. There's also UI for that in Azure AI Foundry, where you can enter some examples of what you want, the format you want as a response, and that works extremely well if you want to play around with
that. I'm putting that on the list. I will use Azure AI Foundry. It's a mouthful for me. But I'll try that as well. No, I'm super excited, and I appreciate the idea, suggestions for testing with page scripting, with some LLMs to help create additional tests. It's yeah, that's exciting. So, what
Yeah, well,
is
LLMs are very good at generating large data sets. I mean, it's if you need to generate large data set for whatever purpose, LLM is really good at that.
for testing data?
Yeah,
That's the other experiment that I wanted to
technology.
try with it. Again, it's unfortunate we have all this great technology, and there's so much that I want to play with, and there's so much that I want to do, that it's a challenge for getting some of that information. So I will also want to play with my idea with it, as you had said, mentioning test data, because I think even maybe a year or so ago, I had a conversation on one of the podcasts about having like open source test data, because we have the Contoso data now, used to be the Chronos data for the applications, but it's not good for every scenario. But now if we could have LLMs create test data following the structure of Business Central, use paid scripting to load the data, or configuration packages, however, whatever's a quicker and easy way to do it. Configuration packages would be a little more standard. I think it would be a great experiment for it to create test data for customers, sales orders, items. That way you could get a volume, and I'm an expert at making bicycles and coffee machines.
Yeah. So I tell you another interesting anecdote about that. When we so you've seen our sales order agent, right? We demo at directions, right? So when we started testing it, we realized we got a pretty good accuracy, in some of the tests we had, and it was like the scenario was send that mail and order some chairs or some coffee, furniture in the coffee machine. So basically the demo data we have in BC, right? And it was working actually pretty well. And then some people tried some other scenario with some other data, and then it was all of a sudden accuracy dropped significantly. And and at the start we couldn't really understand why. So how comes if we were to share chairs and stuff, that or that works fine, but if we order something else, that doesn't work. And then when we realized, because we went and did some experiment, totally outside of BC, just as ChatGPT. It's like we realized, our test data in BC, they are out there, they are on the internet, and LLMs have seen it. It means they know about the Amsterdam share, they know about the all the things we have in the BC database, because it has been around for so many years now. Then and LLMs, they are trained on the internet, so they have seen that data. So they are pretty good at recognizing it. So that's one of the interesting things about interesting side effect of training on the content of the internet, that it relies on certain things. So what we had to do was, we created back to your point, Brad, we created actually a test set, which we don't publish, but we created new test data, also using LLM actually. So basically, we created a toy shop, with children toys and other things, which is totally different than what we had, to test our feature, and that's what we're using to test our AI feature now. And we make sure we don't put that out there, so LLMs don't come by this data and kind of get biased on this front.
It does know it, because I did a blog post on bulk image import to change, and I did go and search, and I used Copilot and said, create me an image of an Amsterdam chair, and it looked like the blue or whatever color, I forget the colors of the chairs, but it created similar chairs to the pictures that were in the sample data.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can ask. I didn't try it, but I'm sure you can ask. What are go ChatGPT and ask what are the chairs in Business Central, and I'm sure it will come up with a list. I'm pretty sure. I haven't tried that, but I'm pretty sure that works.
This is all just amazing. We've gone from pen and paper, just in my lifetime, from pen and paper to a computer or a system, an LMM. I don't even know what you refer to it as. It's almost becoming. I feel like I'm talking to a human sometimes with the information that it gives back in the conversations. Even now, with a lot of the voice chats that you can have with some of the applications, and I just can't believe in my lifetime what I've changed, and the generations now that are growing up with it. It's all they know. It will
That
be
would be
all
the
they know
day.
to start.
That would be the day, Brad, and about using Copilot voice in Business Central one day. That would be fascinating when he talks back to you. Ooh, that's gonna be amazing.
That's not really hard. It's just I mean,
That's not far.
yeah, I'm sure you can. I mean, you probably can do that today somehow. I mean, you can get access to you could run an add-in that does that somehow. I mean, this it's just scaffolding, because these services, it's all all there is they have these text-to-speech and speech-to-text models, which are not LLM's model, all the models, right? And they're just it's just wiring them. It's just plumbing in the end, right? You just wire them to the next thing, and then that works. Actually, we I didn't manage to show that, because when I showed page script. Now we're back to page scripting. When I showed page scripting you said it was in 2023, so I take your word for it. Michael from my team who implemented. I didn't implement that. Michael from my team did. She had a prototype where we had the wired whisper, which was back then the speech to text protocol into that, and you could basically talk to BC and say, hey, do this and that, and it would generate a page scripting script and execute it.
Dude, that's awesome.
Can I ask? I'll ask you this question, and you don't have to answer it. Obviously, you don't have to answer it, but obviously, if it's confidential, don't answer it. But if it's a theory or talk, I see ERP software becoming faceless. And what I mean by faceless is you'll have the data layer, you have the UI, the business logic, and the data layer, where you can go to an implementation, in essence, have the UI created and have a core set of actions that you use to create it, to the point where you're using the voice, because I know you could do it now with email, with the sales order agent. It's getting there, where some of the data input will be just specifically what you need for an implementation from a core set of actions. Or even if a salesperson's in a car, they had a conversation and they could say, create a sales order for Kris for an Amsterdam chair and a sport bicycle with these rims, and give him a 20% discount. And automatically the sales order is created, is put into the process and system. I have seen AI have the ability, and someone demonstrated for me on Business Central, to be able to find the actions on the page. And it's outside of Business Central. It's not something within it. This is how creative people are getting, where it actually was able to find the actions and the buttons on the page and do something. So my thought was, now we won't have a standard UI in that sense. Is that a vision?
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of, so this what you're saying is, everything is an agent, basically, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot. There's a lot of discussions around that, and there surely be. I'm sure there'll be a future where we'll have AI. I mean, right now, agent is a big thing, and agents don't need to be. You've seen our sales order agent demo, right? We keep the human in the loop a lot. Like, you have to basically approve what the AI is doing and the agent is doing at many of the steps. Like, when you get the email, you have to look at the email and say, okay, proceed, right? And when the agent creates a sales quote, you get to look at the sales quote before, and the email is actually crafted before it gets sent to the customer. So there's but we program these steps, right? I mean, it's not like it's not the nature of LLMs or agents to have the human in the loop. We implement it that way, and we could just have, skip this. Right? But now there's tons of reason why at this stage of the technology, and also the maturity of the technology, but also how people psychologically respond to these level of automation, that we want human to be in the loop, right? But our Jakob, which is our UX expert for this team, he has a great way to talk about this. He talks about you have this dial of things where, on one end, if you dial all the way to the right or left, I don't know, you have human very involved at basically all the steps, and the agent is only progressing and executing the different steps as long as you approve every steps. So that's the very conservative approach, and then you can potentially dial all the way to no human in the loop, where the agents are just doing what they're supposed to do, and there's no human intervention. So there's also another way to look at it. People are using the analogy with self-driving car. There's these levels, level 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the self-driving car business, and people are talking about agents with doing the same analogy, with basically level 4 is the fully autonomous version of agents, right? And so I have no doubt we'll get there. It's very. I think it's very hard. I think it'd be presumptuous to try to if I try to tell you what the future will look like, but because so many things are happening, can go in so many directions. But I think if I should venture a guess, there are a few things that are emerging. There will be a certain level of autonomous agent. There will be a certain number of these. How autonomous, I think, hopefully will be, depending on what the scenario is, how critical it is. You don't want an agent to run, I don't know, a nuclear power plant, probably, or
I have a full self-driving vehicle, and the car drives better than other people on the road. So
there are things like this which are still a bit sensitive. You might agree that some AI decides when to pull down the shades in your home, just to take another rather harmless example, right? And then I think there'll be a whole bunch of things in between. Again, it's not going to be an either or. There'll be something that you will trust the AI to do, and some you will require more control, for sure.
Yeah, I like the human in the loop, and I like the point where you're talking about where you can dial it up, because you do have to build, for lack of better terms, and again, it's almost like everyone's interacting with AI like it's a person, but you do have to build up trust so that you can see that it's going to react. And I can understand and see a point where you're talking.
Yeah.
In some cases now, as I had mentioned, I have a full self-driving vehicle, and my daughter was with me, and she told me that the car drives better than I do. And I feel that it's through a progression. So if you take it even from the business point of view with the sales or agent, to have the human in the loop gates to where maybe as the product or the feature of the agents mature, for lack of better terms, now it can be, I want to see all emails, or I don't want to see emails unless this, or some feature, just to use one of the points you have, where the user in the implementation, depending upon what they're working on, can gate it where they feel appropriate versus every step of the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, you still have some sense of like the ability to pull the levers, right? I mean, there's that sense of control, but at the same time, you have an option. Like, I'm up to this point now where I really don't need to interact. I can turn off the human interaction from my side. I can still turn it off, but I don't need it to prompt me to decide about something to go and take action. I'm up to a point as a business owner. If you're, you have a business running Business Central, you get to a point where like, okay, I trust it enough to not have to ask me to get an approval because it does a 99.9% success rate. Why do I need to go and interact with it, knowing that it'll do it successfully 99.9% of the time? Then I can just turn off the lever.
Also in the early previews. We have, with the sales agent, we have, it's very conservative. It asks you very steps of the way, and then when we see that people, it doesn't take very long, like a few minutes of usage, people go, okay, approve, because they kind of. But it's, I mean, you're totally right. I mean, the whole point of it is also to build there's psychological things around, letting go from the things that you were in control, and it's important to build, as technologists and software developers, we need to build that trust in the systems with our users, so they can see that and that it's working as expected. Another thing we do is that, I don't know if you've noticed, but any sales quote or document that has been created by the agent is marked afterwards. So if you can go, even if you turned off, the reviewing part of it, you can go afterwards and look at the records, and you can see that it has been created by AI. So you can go and review it even after the fact and say, okay, even if the sales quote has been created and the mail has been sent, you can go and say, okay, this was created by AI. I still want to take a look at it.
Yeah, and you can go back and say, okay, maybe I don't trust it again, and I can go and turn the checks and balances, just to make sure that I'm comfortable. And then once you're comfortable again, you can turn it off and just let's do the thing. Because like you said, at some point it'll be smart enough to know the risk of certain areas of business where, if I say, hey, if you can get 99% or 90%, whatever, like if you have that control, then I'm okay to let it do its thing and then not worry about it. Maybe I'll check here and there and do quick audits, but I'm comfortable enough that I can let it run autonomously.
With the agents, and as we talk, I mean, I think everything can be an agent, and I think I had some conversations at directions where agents will have specific tasks. They'll do those specific tasks well, just like some individuals may be specialized. What I start to think about is cross-stack agents being able to work together. So right now, we set up an email inbox, and the email, again, to go back to the sales order agent, the sales order agent works. But is there a way to trigger and communicate with other agents, maybe within Outlook, Word, Excel, some of the other Microsoft suites where Copilot is being embedded and agents are in there, to now we have one flat stack. You can have an agent manager that manages the agents for Business Central and other Microsoft products.
So that's funny you mentioned that, because that's, I just got out of a series of meetings exactly on that subject. So there's this new standard. If you haven't heard of it, you should check it out, which come from Anthropic originally. It's called the Model Context Protocol, abbreviated MCP. And there's a lot of hype around this right now, and it's, in essence, is more or less what you described. It is interesting because it is a standard, So the way it works, if you're not familiar with it, it's a relatively simple standard, right? But it is a standard. That's why it's interesting, right? It has a discovery component in it, meaning that you can have an agent or service or something, and basically publish what it can do, and it can be discovered, right, by a client, right? And it's also dynamic, so it can be, it doesn't have to be, it can change as you go, right? So for example, you have let's say you have a web API, right, that does something you like, and then you can change the API, it will still work, right? Because the magic is, when you client, what you do is that you inject an LLM in the mix. And LLMs are pretty good at, figuring out, okay, here's the API description, so I can call that, and then if you change tomorrow, then it'll figure it out, right? And then so what it allows you to do is, do things like, there's this notion of an MCP server. So basically, you think of it as, BC could be Business Central, could be an MCP server. and then you could have a another MCP server, right? Which is so I'll give you an example, and it's not totally constructed because I was playing around with it, and that's basically the prototype that I built just to get my head wrapped around this. So I just exposed we have this API for the top 10 customers. So I just exposed that as an MCP server. And then we have then Google Maps incidentally has also an MCP server, right? And so you can write an application. So you need a client, so I use Visual Studio Code because it has a built-in MCP client in that, but there's also this thing called Cloud Desktop that has it, but you could build your own. And what it allows you to do, so you register, you say, well, here's the tools that I have. So I have BC is one tool, I have Google Maps is another tool, and you can have a weather tool as well, which is also an MCP server. And then you can go in the chat and you can say, oh, okay, look up the address for that customer and then give me driving directions in the chat, right? And so what it does, it kind of orchestrates, so it figures out, okay, I have these tools at my disposition. I can go and look up the address for that particular customer in the BC, using the BC API. And then, getting that address information, it figures out how to feed it into the Google Maps API or Bing API, right? And gives you the driving direction there. And then you can ask, hey, what's the weather there? And then you will call the weather MCP server, right? And so what's interesting with this is that you can have a whole range of tools at your disposal that your client will figure out how to use, right? And OpenAI will support that standard very soon in ChatGPT. Meaning, if you have, in the ChatGPT that from OpenAI, you can go there and you can use, any MCP server that at your disposal. And there's a bunch of these already out there. So you could go in ChatGPT and ask all sorts of things. You can ask things about BC and do things like that.
So is the idea would be eventually as a business, right? So I'm putting myself in the shoes of a business owner, and I have all these Microsoft products. Is the idea in the near future, and again, we can't tell if it's going to happen, is to have an agent that orchestrates within your tenant, maybe within your tenant, to pull all these different agents based upon your prompt, based upon your need, and just let it do its own orchestration of pulling all these different API calls.
Yeah.
And then just let it do its one thing. And that's all it does.
Yeah.
That would be amazing because then you have a specific
exactly
agent.
So you need a client, and that client can be many things, right? That can be, so what in the scenario you're describing, you work from a client. Let's say for example, that could be, imagine it could be Teams, So you could do a chat in Teams and you can go, hey, give me the latest top 10 customers and what's the driving directions. And then Teams would have these MCP servers. You would have like a BC as an MCP server, and it would have Google Maps as an MCP server and other servers at its disposal to answer your question. But then you can also imagine that, Business Central itself, in its UI, could act as a client as well. A Business Central could, if we choose to implement that, it could support other MCP servers, like for example the weather, whatever, or another Microsoft product, Microsoft Sales, for example, which may be a little more interesting in terms of business scenarios, right? So you can, so that's exactly what you described. That's the idea behind this whole MCP thing.
That is wild.
Kris,
I love it.
It's mind blowing because you can take it back to what I was saying, whereas it becomes faceless. Because now the customer of a product or the user of a product doesn't have to be a customer. And sometimes I get drawn to terms that I think aren't as appropriate. You're dynamically using the application, so you have a bunch of services together, and then the agent's going to orchestrate the services from the servers to give you the results. And I like that, the top 10 driving directions, even where they are geographically, and like you had mentioned, bring in the weather. I mean, I could see so much information in it. It's going to become where It's creating these servers or the endpoints and them having access to the business logic in the data that will give us the interface that we need. I just
Here's the wild thing
I
about
don't
this
even know
too.
what's going to
The
happen
new
to
thing
us
about
as a
it,
civilization.
the new thing about it is that it is a standard, and as always, as all standards, it's only going to work if it actually takes hold. Like if people are adopting and starting, but there's a pretty good chance because Microsoft is a big player in that. OpenAI is a big player. Anthropic, which are all really front runners in terms of AI. So the big companies and the big players are the big actors in the AI world are behind this. So there's a pretty good chance they will take hold. And there's already a lot of interest on this technology. And so it's interesting because it's a standard, and that will allow these things. But if it really takes hold, there's a lot of cool things that can happen for sure.
Brad, if you talk about the faceless component of this, here's what. And again, I'm dreaming at this point, right? Like it's going to require some effort. But if imagine if you have your own central agent for your tenant, and you do a business with somebody that happens to have the same capability, maybe this another tenant using Business Central. At some point, all you have to do is connect two tenants together with those two agents talking, and then it'll do its business on its own, right? Based on what that I know about the business, and what it knows about my business. Just have both two tenants talk to each other, and I'm hands off at that point.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Basically what's really new in that, because we've had standards before in our industry. I'm sure you're aware. There's been a lot of attempts to, and standards are only like we have these API. A lot of the things we're doing today are API based, right? So you have an API. We have a lot of services, right? Basically, we live in a service world. There's a web API for this and a web API for that, and you can do a lot of things. You can query about the weather. You can, check out, I don't know, Airbnb probably has an API as well. Everybody has APIs, but if you want to write an application that kind of aggregates this data and do different calls to this API, that's a lot of work. And first of all, you need to learn how to use this API because they're not, necessarily scripting, right? And also your code will break as soon as somebody changes something in this API, right? What's new here is basically what you do is that you say, first of all, you describe this API. There's a standard for describing what they do, right? And then the magic comes from the LLM, because the LLMs are really good at figuring out these changes and getting okay, you get this API, okay, it looks like this, so they can figure out how to call it. And if 2 seconds after, somebody publish an update to this service and change the API, then the LLM will figure it out. That's the new thing. That's basically the magic of it. So whatever client you are, as you described, you have a client, leveraging multiple of these MCP servers, it will keep working. And moreover, you can add more servers, more services to it, in a seamless fashion. That's pretty exciting. There's a lot of interesting application of that, for sure.
I am super thrilled for this, but I have to ground it a little bit from just, again, it's the conversations that I have with individuals. We're talking about AI creating sales orders. We're talking about AI, Kris, your idea of having it be in tenants was extremely beneficial and helpful. But now we have a lot of information within a tenant. We have documents, we have data, we have a lot of points. How can we manage the security from the context of the individual making the call to be able to differentiate when when the AI is creating its data, when it creates the vectors? For example, Vincent, you're responsible for the product group, and you may have access to finance information and human resource information. I work for a different function within your group, and I shouldn't have access to that. What is to prevent, and how can you put measures when AI is training on this information, to use some of the terms? What considerations and what do you put in place to make sure that I don't have access to the payroll files when I'm doing a query or a call, and you are? And then also, Kris, if we're crossing tenants, somebody coming in, how do we scope what they can do in this world of all this automation? Because security is a big concern to a lot of individuals.
Yeah. That's a very good question, and so I can give you some. And yes, that's something that when you develop AI feature, you should be concerned about for sure. You don't want to give, it's but that goes for any automated piece of software you write. As soon as you write, whether it's an agent or and whether there's AI involved or not, if something is doing something in an automated way, you need to be concerned about security and what it does, and that it doesn't access data that it shouldn't be accessing. So the way we and so that's that's a very good question. So the way I can tell you a little bit about the way we addressed it in Business Central, right? So in Business Central, our agent is executing with the credentials that the user you have. So we have a security model where you give basically, we have this permission system, in Business Central. I'm sure you're familiar with, and so you grant the agent the permission that you needed to have and nothing more, right? So we use our built-in permission system, and the agent is acting as a with a certain set of permissions, right? And you cannot grant it a permission, more, wider than the one you have as a user, obviously, right? And moreover, we took an extra step. So the way our agent work, our sales order agent work, is that actually it's working like it's a true agent. It means it's working like a human. It's not calling APIs. It's actually manipulating the products through the UI. So it's looking at the page. So it's not, it's faceless, but basically that's what happens. So we take, we take the page you are on. We show it to the LLM. Say, hey, here's a page. This is how it looks like. Here's what you need to do. So in our case, it could be like create a sales code. What's next? Right? And the LLM says, okay, click that button. Then we do that. Then you get to a new page, right? And we show the page again to the LLM, say, hey, here's the new page. What do I do now? Then the LLM goes, okay, fill that field with that value. Then we do that, and so on and so forth. So that's how our agent works, basically, right?
Okay, so it is working in the context of the UI. Therefore, yes. If it's running by default, it gets the user's permission overlaid.
Yeah.
And again, I'm being loose with the terms. Overlaid to it.
We also have a permission specific to the agent that you can, it's even more restricted than the user. And another thing we're doing is that so the page is, there's a profile, like a regular BC profile that we've made specifically for that agent, right? So it serves several purposes. First of all, we have a simplified version of the pages which are targeting the sales order agent. We have a sales order agent profile, which basically targeting the sales order scenario, because we found out it's a lot better because to show like reduced version of the pages, like simplified version of the pages, not to confuse the agent too much. So we get a better accuracy by showing, there's tons of fields that you will never use, like on the sales quote. There's tons of fields you will never use in the scenarios we're supporting. So no need to show them to the agent because it only get confused, right? So we show a much reduced version of these things, and we remove things like discount, for example, the discount field. We don't want the agent because potentially you could. Here's the thing that you could potentially have. You can do, I don't know if you can call it prompt injection, but given the thing is entirely autonomous, it's going to do what you ask it to do. So if the customer, in a sales order agent scenario, the customer write a mail, say, hey, I want to sell quote for these items, 2 chairs and a desk, and I want a 20% discount. So the LLM is going to go around and the agent is going to go, oh, here's the page. Oh, there's a discount field. What's in the prompt? 20% discount. Okay, I'm just going to put 20% here. It's going to do what you asked it to do. So there are things like that we've purposely disabled so the agent, for example, doesn't see the discount field. So it can't do things of that nature.
No, it's great to hear, because again, when you see these new features and you see the demonstration, it's great to see, to use your wonderful show Under the Hood, how it really works and to understand some of these considerations, because as you had mentioned, we want to build trust in the technology and how it can be used, but also identify that guardrails have been put up so that if it does run and execute, it's not going to go wild and, as you had mentioned, start giving products away for free.
So we announced at Directions that we will release this agent platform soon, which will allow you to build your own agents, and you'll need to think about these things. You need to create the right permission set for your agents for your particular scenario, and you'll need to create these profiles so they are you're not doing, because we can only do the things that we know about in the BC base app. If your solution has some customization that are sensitive for whatever where sensitive data you want the agent to manipulate, you'll need to protect it through agent. But that's just business as usual, I would say.
Yes, I still can't wrap my head around the security context of it. Again, I'll just have to understand and trust. I understand from the sales order agent, but I get hung up on retrieval of information, which is sometimes outside of the context of Business Central. I think more of Copilot in an office setting or a SharePoint setting where you have a lot of files on your server that it's indexing so that you can have employee self-service, for example, within an organization, or even customer self-service, which is it's just amazing. It's the efficiencies that we gain from a lot of these tasks, and I'm still just looking for a good photo AI agent that will organize all of my photos.
I think that's going to be a hurdle for a long time, is the security component, because we move so fast in processes and in being efficient, and typically a security has to catch up. And so it's a fine balance, right? Because you want to make this huge progress, but then at the same time you kind of like hold on, you got to pull the ropes back a little bit and making sure that the security is in place before you let it do its thing. And I think that's going to be like that for quite some time, unless somebody comes up with some simplification of security where it just learns how to do it on its own.
Yeah, the security is always something you need to be taking seriously, for sure. I believe that we're in a pretty good shape with our agent platform, in that sense that we've built the necessary tools and guardrails you can put in place to prevent the agent from doing things you don't want it to do. That said, you always need to be careful, and how so we've done a due diligence with BC, right? We do a lot of testing around security, and we do a lot of what we call responsible AI as well, and try to prevent all the prompt injections, all the misusage of LLMs, all these things. But in the end, again, when you implement your own agent, you'll need to go through the work as well. So there's there's still work. We're not going to get unemployed. Contrary to what everybody says, we're not going to get unemployed anytime soon. I guarantee you that.
No, I don't see it. They've been saying that for years. If you go back to the horse and buggy with the motor vehicle or the automobile,
the nature of the work might change. I find myself these days, when I do, I don't do a lot of coding, but when I do, I approach it very differently than I used to. All the boilerplate code we used to write for basic stuff, you don't do that anymore. You just have the LLMs to do that. There's so much time.
No. And one thing, Kris, I know when to jump in, but one thing, as I say, it's AI isn't going to replace you. Someone with AI is going to replace you. That's what it is. It's not the AI is going to replace you. It's people who are using AI to become more efficient and understand where to use it and when to use it and how to apply it. it's not the AI that's replacing you. It's somebody that has skills, just like any other profession and job that you have to continue to advance with.
Yeah, and I
So
wanted to kind of finish on that. Using AI and the security component. I think my dream of it being tenant specific and have two tenants communicating with each other. It's going to, like you had described, Vincent, for you to build that agent, you have to set security parameters specific to that agent. And if you have it talk to all the different agents, right, you have to also consider all whoever's building them will also have to consider all the security. So I think it's going to take some time, but I think we'll get there eventually, unless someone comes up with a simplification or standard of security across the board. That will be the hurdle, in my opinion. Of course, at the same time, when you set the security, you have to have that. You have to build that trust too with the business owners, as well, or people that are running the business, itself. So exciting times, I think, in my opinion, super exciting.
No, there's a lot of excitement. I'm super excited with all the new features in 2025 Wave 1. Can't wait for 2025 Wave 2 to see the new features. I'm super excited about the page scripting future. Even like you said, even if it's that small removal of the preview tag, because at least we know that now there's a little gas behind it.
Yeah, I mean, this is not going anywhere. I can tell you.
No,
that.
I hope not. I'll be the biggest opponent of its removal. And I'll refuse to allow it to be removed. No, it's a great tool, and I'm super excited to see where Business Central goes with the use of agents and responsible use of agents, and the responsibility with the humans in the loop to build the trust within the application. And to Kris's point of being able to communicate with other tenants or other servers for automating tasks or letting AI run and go with it. We do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I'm super excited about the conversation. It took me a long time to calm down from it. It was great seeing you at Directions North America in Las Vegas. If anyone would like to get in contact with you, what's the best way to reach you?
They can reach me through LinkedIn. Probably the best way. Yeah. Look me up.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you, Vincent.
All right, thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com, and you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io, and my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.